Legend of Shenli. This is the chapter where Shenli and Xingji made love from the novel.
A cool hand came from behind, clasping her shoulders. Xingji's skin pressed against hers, causing Shenli to unconsciously let out a comfortable sigh. The hot temperature in her body was slightly reduced. Xingji wrapped her waist with his arms, and because Shenli slightly arched her back when he bit her neck again, her back couldn't touch his cool skin, so she unconsciously moved in his lap, trying to get closer to him. Xingji sensed her intentions, and the hand that was around her waist gently lifted her up and let her back touch him. The skin touched, and his heartbeat was noticeably chaotic for a moment. Shenli. Her bare chest was between his two arms that were encircling her body. As long as he opened his eyes, he could see her feminine figure. Her breasts were standing firmly in the air. That part was a little different in color, like a budding flower, making people want to touch it. Concentrate, he warned himself. He was keenly aware that there were evil thoughts slowly condensing around him. The evil thoughts and desires that Lady Jin has accumulated over tens of thousands of years were there. These things had no real form, but they had the power of enhancing the already existent thoughts and desires on people's hearts. Xingji was helping Shenli during her treatment. It could not be interrupted and nothing could go wrong. He closed his eyes, calmed his mind, and concentrated on letting his mana work in Shenli's body, solving her mana conflicts one by one. With the inflow of Xingji's power, the heat of Shenli's whole body was gradually suppressed, and her brain, who was burned by the high temperature, finally recovered a little sense. She could not see with her eyes, but her sense of touch was extremely sensitive. She knew that she was in front of him. Two naked men's arms were encircling her, and a strong and cool body was stuck behind her. She knew who was holding her. Shenli admitted that at this moment, her brain was almost blank. After being dazed, her sanity gradually recovered. She knew that Xingji was healing herself, but Xingji's head was close to her ears, and he was biting her neck. This was a dangerous posture because Xingji could kill her by biting her carotid artery with too much strength. She had to be calm, but she already started to freak out. This sense of crisis, as well as the magic power he continuously injected into her body, made her more clearly and profoundly realize the existence of this person, and realize that they were now glued together in an almost unforgivable, intimate position. She could feel the beating of his heart, the breath he exhaled on her shoulders, and his slightly moist lips around her neck, and occasionally she could even feel the arc of his throat subconsciously swallowing. Everything was so clear and true, even if Shenli couldn't see. She also gritted her teeth and closed her eyes tightly, as if she could feel a little less like this, as if her heartbeat would calm down a bit, as if those strange impulses would slowly disappear. But fuck, her dark world now was full of Xingji sounds, his smell, his heartbeat, breathing, and the rubbing sound of his arm gently moving on her skin. All of this made it hard for her to. She couldn't resist it. Shenli moved her body uncomfortably, and Xingji behind her took a heavy breath. He hugged Shenli's hands tightly, as if warning her not to move. It would be over soon. Xingji could feel that his breath was already in her entire body. Now, Lady Jin could finish the treatment later. Xingji forced himself to calm down. At this time, how could he still think about other things? But Shenli took a deep breath and expanded her chest. He let go as if he was afraid of strangling her, but when he hugged her again, he buckled his arm on Shenli's shoulder and accidentally touched one of her exposed nipples. As if electricity passed through her body, Shenli became stiff, and her breathing was almost still. She didn't know what Xingji thought at this time, but Shenli felt that if he touched her again, she was afraid she would lose her mind. She must have gone crazy, and if she is crazy, she shouldn't harm Xingji. Why not? Suddenly a voice popped out in her mind, as if another self was looking at her in a dark corner. If sex is a sin, wouldn't everything be born of sin? No, it's not the same. Shenli wanted to refute that self. He is a god, and he is in charge of the world, so he can't be afflicted. He can't, but why do you want to accompany him in this depression? It's his business that he can't have personal affairs. What that has to do with you? You are Shenli. No one stipulated that you can't have personal affairs. Since he needs restraint, then you can make him stronger, you can satisfy your own selfish desires and even keep him from violating the ways of heaven. Shenli was shocked. Just in this cave, no one will know. She heard her voice full of the ultimate temptation. You have always suppressed yourself, restrained yourself. What the world needs, what the people of the demon world need. But what about yourself? Right here, indulging in this life once, no one will know. Heavens will can't blame Xingji, this is just your fault, it was you who couldn't restrain yourself. Quote. The voice faded, but the feeling of her skin became more sensitive. Perhaps it was her illusion. The arm around her was trembling inexplicably. His breath left her body and finally, his mana returned to his own mouth. TL note, I feel that we readers are that voice, begging for this to happen ha ha ha. The two should separate now, however, he did not let go of her. His teeth left Shenli's flesh, but his lips did not leave. He stopped there quietly, doing nothing, but he seemed to be kissing her. Her neck veins were pulsing, the mood was ambiguous and extremely dangerous. Quote. Gee, she rarely called his name like that. Ha, he muffled, the voice from his throat was hoarse and extremely magnetic, and easily stirred Shenli's restless heartstrings. She stroked his hand that was holding her waist with one hand, stretched back with the other hand, hugged Xingji's head, and gently pressed and squeezed him. Shenli listened to her muttering voice and said, Don't move, just, don't move. Quote. Xingji pressed his lips to her neck motionlessly, feeling the vitality of her pulse. Because of her movements, blood bead oozes from the bitten wound. Xingji's eyes are dim, not knowing if it was intentional or not. The tip of his tongue slid across Shenli's neck, licking the blood oozing out of her. The gentle movement and the gentle tip of the tongue easily broke the last string in Shenli's heart. She had not put down the hand that held Xingji's head, and she turned her whole person in his arms, and her other hand hugged his back, almost impatiently printing her lips on his. The smell of her blood flowed between the breaths of the two. Stop, she called softly, her voice slightly confused, but the next sentence was extremely firm, I will treat you too. Quote. The person kissing her seemed to move the corners of his mouth. After a while, he vaguely replied, yeah. Quote. After he agreed to this, Shenli left his lips and fumbled a little. She sucked hard on his neck, and the place immediately became red when she stopped. Shenli said, This is my mark for strengthening you. She emphasized, I made you stronger. Quote. Shenli, Xingji said suddenly, has anyone ever told you that when a woman always emphasizes a word, it is very inviting? He covered the back of Shenli's head with one hand, pushed her in front of him, and unceremoniously covered her lips so that she had no time to speak. Shenli let him kiss her, but her hand caught Xingji's hand that was in her waist, placed the hand in her chest, and then pressed his hand down on her. When his palm touched the softness, Shenli's body stiffened, and within a moment, she wrapped her arms around him and used all the techniques she knew to tease with her lips and tongue. Xingji's palms covered her breasts until Shenli's mind became blurry. He touched the tip slightly, and Shenli's body became stiff involuntarily. So he touched again, and then boldly kneaded with 2 fingers. Shenli's body softened, and her throat let out an extremely depressing moan before she fell softly. Xingji had already wrapped her waist. Shenli, Xingji stopped, I really hope you don't regret it. Quote. Shenli smiled, the one who will regret, it should probably be you. Quote. She dropped her hand and put them in his bottoms. She fumbled. And touched the hot thing and sighed. The shape was slightly straightened, he gasped because of Shenli's hand, and she raised her head quickly and kissed his lips again. This was so unexpected that Xingji stopped, and then leaned back and fell to the ground. Shenli also pounced on his chest. Sitting on his lap she patted his chest and lower abdomen with one hand, and finally stopped at his chest again with her fingertips. Don't stop me, she said, gently leaning down, putting that part on her mouth. You can't do it by yourself, Xingji said, but she only gave Xingji a slight bite and he frowned. Shenli, quote, she heard him call her name but ignored him because she had reached the last place between them with one hand. If there is a God's will, Shenli thought, then it can blame her. Shenli sat on Xingji and buried him quietly in her body. The tearing pain almost made her unable to continue, but this was their only time doing this. Therefore, no matter how painful it is, she made her mind, she would continue, even if it split her, grind flesh and blood, she would continue. She wanted to be with Xingji so much in her heart, she wanted to be with him all the time. When he entered completely, Shenli lost all her strength in an instant, panting heavily, crawling on his chest, listening to his heartbeat as fast as her own. She felt him gently touching her own head, and heard his distressed voice, "Does it hurt?" Shenli's eyes became wet instantly. She lay on his chest, and her voice was trembling. "It hurts." She said, "It hurts." Quote, "It hurts to have to leave you, it hurts to be with you." Shenli was overwhelmed and didn't know what expression she should do. Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Xingji stroked Shenli's head lightly, and finally sat up still connected with her. He hugged Shenli in his arms, patted her back gently, and pressed her head against his neck and said, "I will be there for you, I will always be, no matter if the sky is broken, Shenli, I will always be by your side." Quote, Shenli couldn't help trembling with pain. In the end, she bit his shoulder. In this situation where any touch was extremely sensitive, his muscles tightened, and the things below couldn't help but move inside Shenli. Shenli softened all over, but Xingji supported her. Xingji hugged her waist and held her. "Don't cry, Shenli." Quote, Shenli actually did not shed tears. She was sure that tears were weak and feeble, and nothing could be changed when she shed them, but with Xingji's words, she actually felt a sense of powerlessness, letting her tears go and soak his shoulders. "You can't say that, you're not feeling this pain." Quote, Xingji sighed softly, admitting defeat, and said, "I also hurt." Quote, her bottom was too tight, and Xingji inside her made her feel numb, sore, and bubbly, and she could even feel Xingji's pulse. Thinking about being strangled, she didn't feel well. Shenli hugged him and laughed, but after a while, tears came out again. She wiped away the tears, and continued to laugh. "We too." Shenli said, "It's really unreasonable." Quote, "Yes, it's unreasonable," Xingji replied softly. His lips gently rubbed against the edge of Shenli's neck, and slowly descended, reaching the front of her chest, gently touching her in the same way she did to him before, licking him. The tip of his tongue agitated her already tense emotions. "Xingji." Shenli hugged Xingji's head, her body's senses were concentrated on her breasts. Shenli felt that the paint underneath was slightly relieved, so she boldly moved her waist a little. The connecting place just rubbed lightly, and the man who was buried in her chest tightened and groaned. "It turned out that Xingji just chuckled against Shenli's skin. It turned out that the high god persistence was no more than that. He had already restrained his itching so hard, but with only one light movement, Shenli had instantly disintegrated his line of defense and broke into his heart like an army. Fortunately, Shenli didn't move for a second time, because it was this light movement that had caused her body to tremble involuntarily from pain. "I don't understand." She was breathless. Why would anyone be keen on this? Quote, obviously, this was more uncomfortable than being cut by a knife. Breath flowed between the two of them, and they both calmed down for a while, and then Xingji said, "If it hurts, we can stop." Quote, Shenli gritted her teeth. "You can still say that." She breathed hard, her lower abdomen tightened, but after the pain, a tingling sensation spread between the two. Her fingers tightly clasped Xingji's back. Teeth bit his shoulders. "Today, even if it is a painful death, I will never stop." This is the only time she could be with him. Shenli gritted her teeth. This was the first and perhaps the last time, completely possessing each other. She tried her best to keep the burden of the three realms out of her heart and threw away all her identities and their responsibilities and burdens. How can she give up now? She wants him, even if she tears herself apart, even if she dies, even if she falls to the bottom of hell, she wants him. For at least one moment in this life, she's only Shenli, giving herself wholeheartedly to one person, and integrating that person into her body. She dare not ask for too much, nor can she ask for too much. That's it. A moment is enough. She moved up and down with a trembling body. The feeling of friction was extremely painful for Shenli, but it was bliss for Xingji. Shenli's blood flowed from the depths of her body, and it even wetted the area where she was connected with Xingji. His complexion instantly turned red, and his breathing became uncontrollably heavy. He hugged Shenli tightly with both hands, feeling her body trembling from pain. But listening to her groaning as she couldn't help it, the joy in his body was exchanged for the pain in his heart that seemed to be crushed. He felt Shenli's despair. It was not difficult for him to guess what Shenli was thinking. It was precise because of understanding Shenli and seeing through her mind. Xingji couldn't control but to feel worried for her. She is such a brave person, he couldn't help but like this kind of person. Shenli, he called her name hoarsely. I will be with you, he said, as if swearing, we will always be together. Quote. Shenli's movements became more intense, and Xingji knew that she didn't feel happy. He hugged her tighter, controlling all his senses that were mobilized by Shenli, and just quietly hugged her tightly. Shenli could no longer move. He gently patted her on the back to calm her down. So, don't be afraid. You don't need to be so afraid. Quote. Shenli sat on him, slowly calming down. She stretched out her hand to touch his face, and smiled swiftly. It's really strange, why although I'm so close and hugged you so tightly, why do I still feel horrified? Quote. Trust me. Xingji dropped a kiss on her neck and inhaled lightly. Shenli, trust me. Quote. Shenli didn't know how to believe him, she just turned her anxiety into action, so she lowered her head, and kissed his lips fiercely again. She didn't want to think about anything anymore. Now she will just do what she wanted to do, and later when she wakes up, she can try to fix it. She wanted to take the initiative again, but Xingji suddenly moved on his own. This made Shenli somewhat unaccustomed, but both positions were hurtful, so she didn't bother to use any more force, relying on Xingji. However, Xingji's movements were extremely soothing. Shenli occasionally heard men discuss such things in the military. She knew that a man would never be this calm in normal situations. The body above under her body was hot, but his breath was also restrained. She knew that he was controlling himself. In this situation, he was still taking care of her. Shenli's heart was crossed. Her heart was in such a state anyway. At least, shouldn't one of them be happy? She touched around Xingji's back, using her lips and tongue back and forth in his neck. She heard Xingji swallowing unbearably, and moving a little bit faster under her body, but still restrained tightly. Shenli bit his ear and softly said, "Hurry up, it's okay." Quote. Xingji smiled, utterly dumb. "Don't worry, you will hurt." Quote. Shenli hugged him. "I'm fine, I can hold it back." Quote. After a quick stop, he sighed slightly. "Why don't you understand?" Quote. He raised his head and bit Shenli's chin, slightly condemning. "I want you happy." Quote. They both just want to make each other happy. Shenli resisted the pain and took the initiative to act. "Xingji, you don't know, I am happy enough now." Quote. As soon as she moved, she made Xingji unable to restrain himself. He turned around, pulled the clothes on the side, and placed them under Shenli. Switching up and down positions, his movements were much smoother. Shenli's hand caught countless marks on his back, but she didn't say anything, only occasionally squeezed his name out of her throat, as if he was the only one she could perceive, as if they were the only ones in this world. The only thing that survived and lingered on her mind. Xingji. Quote. Her voice was a little broken. "You know, I want to be with you." Quote. Then we will be together. He leaned down and gently touched Shenli's lips. His breathing became more rapid and his movements underneath became faster. Shenli gritted her teeth and Xingji's body began to spasm. The scorching heat dissipated, and his breathing was chaotic. But this is not. Her wheezing was so disorderly, but her words were so clear and cold. "It's not possible." Quote. Chapter 65. 2. Piraso sa ilaliming dilla, Pression 128 sa 15 minutes. Heartkeep. If you have papillomas on your chest, neck or armpits, read this. Organic teatox. Shenli was exhausted, so she closed her eyes, and fell asleep quietly. When she woke up again, her vision had recovered. She looked around and found out what the stone cave actually looked like. Xingji was still there. In the stone cave, the air didn't flow, and the extremely ambiguous smell seemed to have been coiling around the two of them and the clothes that Xingji used to cover them. Shenli smiled and thought that this was similar to sharing a bed. She sat up, and put her hand to pull her clothes from him, but he didn't move, letting her pull for a long time without succeeding. Shenli frowned and Xingji with his eyes closed just let out a soft sigh. "I've been waiting for you to speak with me." Quote. He opened his clear eyes, there was no confusion of someone who just woke up. Shenli said silently, "Wake up now, give me the clothes." Quote. He still didn't move, and only said, "After 4 or 5 hours, you should receive treatment again." After hearing these words, Shenli still didn't react for a while. When she reacted, her face became stiff. Yes, she should receive treatment after 4 or 5 hours, so that she could get stronger and leave. It was inevitable. To think that the two have been sitting there naked for 4 or 5 hours. And, this situation, speaking in such ambiguous words. Her face was burning. God. Shenli stayed quiet for a long time, and dragged the clothes out from under Xingji with great strength. "It will be cured when the time comes." Quote. Pulling apart Xingji's clothes, Shenli generously put on her clothes in front of Xingji. But when she turned around, she saw that Xingji was also dressed. He smiled softly, "As your king and I always treated each other with courtesy, and I cannot be abrupt now." Quote. Shenli nodded, sat down, and solemnly said, "What happened today was all my fault. God does not need to blame himself." Quote. Seeing her saying this seriously, Xingji stopped for a while, and shook his head then smiled. "First, I don't blame myself. Second, what exactly is your fault? Third, Shenli, why are you acting like you took advantage of me?" Finally, Xingji suddenly got up and walked to Shenli in an instant. He knelt on one knee, bent over, and raised Shenli's chin. When Shenli didn't react, he printed his lips on her. After grinding her lips for a while, he let her go. He didn't dodge Shenli's dazed gaze, his smile was a little helpless. "I know what I'm doing, and I'm always sober." Quote. Shenli seemed to froze, forgetting all his reactions. After a long while, she pushed him forward violently. He didn't move, and she fell to the ground by herself. Shenli covered her lips and looked at him. "You are crazy." Quote. Xingji chuckled, "About me, from the moment you were buried in the Eastern Sea, I was never normal again." Quote. "No," Shenli said with a serious face, "no. You can be crazy, others can be crazy, even the 3 realms can be crazy, but you can't. You are their lives, you can't be crazy." Quote. "What can I do then?" Xingji said, "I have stepped into the abyss. I struggled and refused, but in the end, destiny still never let me go. Shenli, what do you think I should do?" Shenli was silent. Xingji looked at her for a long while, and said, "Only emotions will not be a problem. If I never do anything against the sky, I won't be backlashed by the heavens. Shenli, can you believe me?" He smiled, "Would you like to help me, and try this with me? Outer sky is free from outside interference, we can stay there forever." Quote. Shenli looked at him, then shook her head, "I can't do it." Quote. There are so many things that have yet to be resolved. Fu Sheng is still alive, the demon kingdom has been threatened and her life has gradually become confused. And, although the sky is stable, stability is not the life state that Shenli pursues. In this stone cave, she can tell herself that she is only Shenli and can tolerate her own greed for a while, but once she goes out, she is Azure King, there is a home with her name in the demon realm, and there are so many generals and soldiers under her, they are her responsibility. Even if Xingji's actions were free, easy and bold enough, Xingji vowed that he would not violate the way of heaven and Shenli couldn't let go of this responsibility. Moreover, even if they really do go to the outer sky together, such a woman who will cause him trouble unleave he uncertain, how can the heavens tolerate a high god that may collapse at any time? Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much.